Bitcoin is kind of like the invention of basic medicines and water pumping and things like that. They can alleviate some of those issues with that era. So the telecommunication era has been this, when you exist in that gap where you have fast transactions but not yet fast settlements. So bandwidth was not good enough, encryption was not good enough, all these things were not sophisticated enough. But now that we have those sophistications, we can start alleviating the problems we've built up over the past century and a half about these centralized ledgers. So yeah, there has been from the beginning significant downsides, and over time, as the systems get less and less stable, those downsides show themselves more and more frequently at a faster pace and at bigger magnitudes, and people are waking up.
Forget price charts and market cycles. Bitcoin is experiencing something far more revolutionary right now. Like the early internet before Netscape Navigator, Bitcoin is shedding its tech experiment skin and transforming into something your non-technical friends and family might actually understand. Lyn Alden's comparison is brilliantly simple. Bitcoin today mirrors the pre-browser internet, powerful but puzzling to mainstream users. But that's rapidly changing. The Bitcoin browser moment has arrived quietly, while everyone was distracted by price fluctuations. The signs are everywhere. Wallet interfaces have simplified, transactions move with newfound smoothness, and the paralyzing fear of sending your crypto into a digital black hole is finally fading. For early adopters, this evolution seems natural, but for Bitcoin's future, it's everything. Let's be clear, we're not celebrating mission accomplished. Critical challenges remain. Privacy features need significant polish, scaling solutions demand innovative approaches, and nobody wants the awkward seed phrase conversation at family gatherings. But here's what makes this moment different. Bitcoin's foundation isn't just solid anymore, it's magnetic. Builders are flocking to the ecosystem at unprecedented rates, bringing fresh approaches to old problems. The stakes couldn't be higher. If Bitcoin completes this transition successfully, we're witnessing more than just another market cycle. We're seeing the birth of a parallel financial system. Not one built for speculation, but one designed to function seamlessly in everyday life. The question has shifted from, will Bitcoin succeed, to how quickly will mainstream adoption happen? And more importantly, are you positioned to benefit from this transformation? Stay with us as we explore Lyn Alden's explosive interview for deeper insights into this critical evolution. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and enable notifications for more content that cuts through the noise and focuses on what truly matters in the crypto revolution. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's dive into the video.
Some of the problems are, I would say probably it's a scale, right? That like some problems which people really feel personally is when their bank accounts get like frozen or they can't access their money anymore, can't withdraw. And then on the other side, there's another extreme that like this system is able to finance war and basically make war even affordable, whereas like Bitcoin or the new system would make that obsolete. Can you maybe talk about first of all, those problems we're facing or that are emerging off that system?
Yeah, so people obviously wake up whenever something acute happens. So for example, literally you can't access your own money. That's when it kind of wakes people up. Those subtle things go undetected for a longer period of time. So back before we started being so reliant on banking and central banking, debasement was still a thing. It was just a very slow process. So if a Roman emperor wanted to debase coinage to go to war, for example, he literally had to like get the coins back from the people through taxes, remelt the coins, and then spend them back into the economy and kind of capture that opaque spread that he just made between taxes and spending is through that kind of debasement. Less precious metal per coin, and there's only so fast you can do that. You can't just teleport everyone's gold and silver coins to you. It actually is that forceful process of gathering them, remelting them, and distributing. That's why you see debasement was usually pretty slow. It's a pretty slow process. It would happen over generations. But once we went to the post-telegraph era, where everybody just kind of keeps their money in accounts. And even often the bank's not holding the gold. Often the central bank is holding the gold, and the banks are just a ledger on top of the central bank. With one stroke of a pen overnight, they can cut a currency in half. They can cut it by 3/4. They can cut it by more. Over a 5-year period, they could cut 99.9% of the value away just by printing more and more money, because the debasement's no longer physical. It's that abstract layer. And so that has really accelerated the power, and it spreads like a virus. So if one country is able to kind of devalue the liquid savings of its whole citizenry to go to war, the one that's being warred upon has to kind of do a similar thing. And so if one country can do it, it kind of spreads to almost all of them. And so I think when that problem's fixed, it's not necessarily an end to war. It's just an end to those subsets of wars that happen for that reason. During the beginning of the Iraq War, right? So the United States was hit by 9/11. We responded to going into Afghanistan. But in that chaos, then the administration wanted to go in a separate country that was not involved in the 9/11 attacks, that's not even bordering Afghanistan. And and if you look at the public polls at the time, 70% of Americans, over 70%, were in favor of invading Iraq. Now, if you had to ask at the same time, okay, there's a 10% war tax on your income to pay for the war in Iraq, should we invade it? You can imagine that approval number would be way less. There's no cost, as far as they were concerned, there's no cost. They're like, well, we got this giant military and they're saying they're the bad guys, let's go invade them. And there's no cost. The cost is instead opaquely deferred. So, in taxing and spending, taxing obviously can be coercive, but at least it's transparent, right? If they raise your taxes for a reason, that gives people can protest over it. They can revolt. They can vote for someone else. Or if it's not a democracy, they can protest and cause problems at scale. And that's why kings often would resort to debasement. It's basically the opaque way to take a little bit more off the top that's not really clear to people. And in the fiat currency world, that slice they can take off the top is much, much bigger. And so, the estimate so far for what the whole war on terror costs is something like 6 trillion. It's expected, with interest, it's going to go to something like 13 trillion. And if you had asked people at the time, this is going to, your future savings, your future wages are going to get heavily debased because of this war we're doing. Maybe people would have been less willing to do it. But that's basically a war that could only take place at the scale, especially at the scale that it did, in that kind of fiat world where you can just defer things so much and have the consequences delayed so much from the action that no one even blames them for the action.
Talk a lot about money and currency, but there's a difference in there. Can you maybe define that for the viewer?
So people define them differently, and people can get kind of nitpicky, I think, on the topic. But basically, I would define money as something that is in and of itself. Right, so gold, for example, is money, especially in a world that perceives it as money, and silver is money. Whereas a certificate that is redeemable in gold, or a certificate that's just not redeemable in anything, and it's kind of enforced through tax policy, those would be more like currencies. Something that is the actual kind of final instrument that is used in a medium of exchange. And in some instances, it's both. I mean, basically, if you're using a gold coin or silver coin for trading value, it's both a money and a currency, whereas in other times they're separate. But people will probably quibble over the different ways to define them. And there's been a long debate on, does money emerge naturally or is it a top-down phenomenon? And I think most history shows that it arises from the bottom up for the most part. And even when it is imposed from the top down, that's only over a certain jurisdiction, and it's still on the global layer, those have to compete with each other. As an example, in Egypt and many other countries, there are black markets in dollars. And that is even though it's a top-down currency, the dollar, the fact that there's markets in Egypt or Argentina or Lebanon for physical cash dollars and not not Singapore dollars, not really the Chinese yuan, even though it's a similar sized economy. It's a natural gravitation towards the dollars that happens in some of those markets, and that's kind of a result of the network effect and kind of the global competition that occurs. So I think what's notable is that the credit theory of money, the state theory of money, so chartalism, that all emerged kind of during and shortly after the invention of the telegraph and the widespread distribution of the telegraph. So if you go back far enough in history, that idea doesn't really emerge because it kind of doesn't make sense. People, they gravitate towards gold and silver as money. If you try to come in and be like, use my fake token instead, it's not going to go well. But it was only when that state issued money or bank issued money started solving a problem for people. They said, okay, so this whole gold thing is getting really inefficient now in this telegraph world, and we're going to use these big ledgers to transfer around. People gravitated towards that, and then economists, certain economists and certain state actors said, well, it's natural for us to issue money. Money is what we issue. But that only happened because the technological reality kind of put the ball in their court. It gave them the favor for that period of time. And I think, as soon as there's a money that can move as fast as fiat, but that isn't issued by a central entity, that starts obsoleting that argument. And so I think that where technology it is at any given time kind of changes the favor of who's ahead of the debate at the period of time. I think pre-telegraph, it'd be very hard to make that argument. It's not an accident that during that period where the telegraph is out but Bitcoin's not out, early in that period, that's when all these arguments surfaced. That's when those theories became dominant. That's how the world runs now. And post-Bitcoin, there's a kind of a renaissance to kind of push back against that idea. And I think it's very technologically dependent. Digital settlement.
What are the misconceptions about Bitcoin and what central banks try to say about Bitcoin, and then move into what Bitcoin really is?
One quick example before we even get into that is how the Overton window can shift based on technology. So back in the 1800s, transactions were inherently pretty private. And even if you were an authoritarian king or something, the idea that you could surveil everyone's transactions was not even really thinkable. Fast forward to today, everybody's using these centralized digital ways to transfer value to each other. And so anyone who wants to transact privately is often viewed as weird. Like, why? I have nothing to hide. What are you trying to hide with your private transactions? And yet that's just the default has shifted, even though the need for privacy has not really shifted.
In a world of financial restrictions, Bitcoin stands as the ultimate rebellion, harder than gold, faster than light, and completely beyond government control. This isn't just digital money, it's financial liberation encoded into mathematics. Why do governments fear it? Because Bitcoin shatters their monopoly on money. No more frozen accounts, no more capital controls, just pure, unstoppable financial freedom flowing across borders at light speed. The contrast couldn't be starker. While central banks print endless currency, Bitcoin verifies with ruthless precision. Where traditional money systems trap you, Bitcoin sets you free. The hardest money in human history has evolved, and now it moves at the speed of information itself. Bitcoin's power lies in its radical equality. While the privileged enjoy stable banking systems, billions worldwide suffer under hyperinflation and arbitrary account freezes. Bitcoin changes this equation completely, offering everyone the same financial privileges regardless of location or status. This isn't merely digital cash, it's gold reimagined for the digital age. Inflation-proof in a world of endless money printing, seizure-resistant when governments overreach, globally accepted when local currencies collapse. As Lyn Alden powerfully explains, Bitcoin represents humanity's escape hatch from fundamentally broken monetary systems. Where failing currencies crash under political pressure, Bitcoin empowers anyone, anywhere, to exit financial captivity. The revolution won't come through traditional banking. It's already happening in digital form, one transaction at a time. Let's continue with more insights from Lyn Alden's revealing interview about this financial transformation.
And so Bitcoin's in that boat where, people kind of like, well, what do you mean you want money outside of the state, money that can't be just debased or that can't be stopped? What kind of bad things must you be up to? And that's not really how it works. I would remind the audience that there are 200 countries in the world. Some of them are fairly benign. Other ones are fairly harsh. You can imagine if you're in any one of the countries that's run by dictators and things like that. I was on stage with Farida. She's from Togo, where democracy advocates would have their bank accounts frozen and seized and things like that, right? And that's one example of dozens and dozens out there. And so basically, for anyone who thinks Bitcoin has no value, they're often from fairly privileged environments. In the United States, most people don't, even though there's subtle problems with the system, most people don't go throughout their day and think, man, payments are really hard to make. And for savings, they can plow money into the S&P 500, right? Whereas in many countries in the world, they don't have that. Their money debases more quickly. There's 40 currencies in Africa, over 40 currencies. Imagine the friction of trying to do trade across 40 different currencies. Latin America has like 30 plus different currencies. These are all frictions that people face in their more daily life. And Bitcoin comes along, and Bitcoin is money that can't be debased, money that flows across borders, money that is very hard to censor. You know, there's a high cost to trying to censor the network. And so that's all it is. And people are kind of like, they're so ingrained in the current system, they can't see why that would be valuable to people. And it's money that's portable. You can bring it with you around the world. You can self-custody it. No centralized entity can debase it.